My husband thought he could cheat with his secretary and keep it a secret. He didn't know I had the power to own the very company where it all happened, and end both their careers in one move. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more powerful stories. Thank you. When I look back now, I realize my marriage was more of a carefully curated performance than a true partnership. Back then, I was convinced we were the golden couple, friends admired us, family pointed to us as the example of how love should be, and even strangers could see the spark between us. Or so I thought. He was attentive in all the ways that made it easy to believe I was special. Birthdays were celebrated with surprise getaways, anniversaries with candlelit dinners in places I'd only dreamed of visiting. He had a way of making me feel like the center of his world. We traveled often, collecting photographs and stories like precious souvenirs, moments that felt like proof our bond was unshakable. Our nights were filled with laughter over a bottle of wine, and our mornings were slow and tender, sipping coffee side by side in comfortable silence. It's strange how, when you're living inside a lie, you don't recognize the script you're reading from. The cracks began as tiny, almost invisible lines. He started keeping his phone closer, sometimes flipping it over on the table, so the screen faced down. Calls became more frequent, often answered in another room, his voice low and hurried. "It's just work," he'd say with an easy smile, and I wanted so badly to believe him that I never pressed further. Business trips multiplied. At first, they seemed like opportunities for his career to grow, and I played the role of the supportive wife, encouraging him to chase success. I told myself it was temporary, that the long nights alone were an investment in our future together. But somewhere deep down, a quiet voice began to whisper that something wasn't right. I ignored it. I buried it under excuses, deadlines, demanding clients, corporate politics. I told myself every marriage has its busy seasons, and this was ours. I even defended him when friends made offhand comments about how often he was away. But the truth has a way of seeping through, no matter how tightly you lock the door against it. I didn't know it then, but every unexplained absence, every hushed phone call, every late-night email was a thread slowly unraveling the fabric of our marriage. If anyone had told me at that time that my husband, the man I trusted with my heart, my dreams, my future, would betray me so deeply, I would have laughed. I thought we were a team, building something real and lasting. I had no idea that behind the loving gestures and the picture-perfect smiles, he was already rewriting the ending to our story, and I was about to find out in a way that would take the breath right out of my lungs. It began with little things, small enough that I could talk myself out of worrying. He started working later than usual, brushing it off with vague comments about urgent deadlines or last-minute meetings. The warmth in his voice when we spoke on the phone felt thinner, as if he was distracted by something, or someone else. Then there were the text messages. I'd catch a glimpse of his phone lighting up with a notification, and he'd quickly turn it face down. Once, I saw him smiling at his screen, the kind of smile he used to save for me. When I asked what was so funny, he mumbled something about a coworker's joke and changed the subject. Weekends became less about us and more about catching up on work. He started dressing sharper for the office, wearing cologne even on days when no clients were scheduled to visit. I told myself I was overthinking, that marriage meant trusting your partner even when things felt off. But deep down, the unease was growing. The man who used to confide in me about everything now seemed like a closed book. I could feel the distance between us stretching wider each day, but I had no proof, only a gnawing suspicion that our perfect marriage was starting to crack in ways I couldn't yet see. The moment that changed everything came on a rainy Thursday night. He had claimed he was working late again, but when I called his office line, no one answered. Something in me snapped. I grabbed my keys and drove to his building, my heart pounding with every mile. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for his car. I walked through the dimly lit lobby, my heels echoing against the marble floor. The receptionist was gone for the night, so I made my way upstairs. That's when I saw it. Through the glass walls of his office, he was there, leaning against his desk, laughing softly with someone. Her. The secretary. They were close. Too close. Her hand rested on his arm in a way that made my stomach turn. I froze, the scene burning into my memory. They didn't see me. I turned and left quietly, the sound of my own heartbeat deafening in my ears. By the time I got home, I knew two things. My marriage was over, and I was going to make sure they both paid for every lie they'd told. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream or throw things or beg for an explanation. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at a blank page in my notebook, and started to plan. It wasn't enough for me to leave him. That would have been too easy for him. He could have spun a story, painted himself as the victim, maybe even kept his job and her in his life. No, I wanted him to understand exactly what it felt like to lose everything in a single moment. The thing he didn't realize about me was that I wasn't just his wife. I was also someone who had spent years building my own career, my own network, and my own financial security. I knew people, powerful people. And among those people were investors with their eyes on his company. I called one of them the next morning, my voice calm but steady. We met for coffee, and I laid everything out, how I could be an asset to the company, how I had the resources to help push a deal through quickly, and how I could take the majority share before anyone even knew what was happening. From that moment on, every step I took was deliberate. I started gathering information about the company's structure, its board members, its financial vulnerabilities. I met quietly with lawyers, drawing up agreements that would ensure my anonymity until the moment I was ready to reveal myself. It was strange, really, how empowering it felt to channel all my rage into strategy. While he spent his days wrapped up in lies, I was building the chessboard where I'd checkmate him without warning. By the end of the second week, the plan was in motion. And I knew, when the time came, the look on his face would be worth every sleepless night. Once the idea had taken root, I moved quickly. I wasn't about to give him or anyone else a chance to catch wind of my plan. The key was secrecy, silent, calculated moves behind the scenes. I started by contacting an old friend who worked in corporate acquisitions. Over lunch, I told her I was looking for an investment, careful not to reveal my personal motives. She agreed to connect me with two key shareholders who were eager to sell their stakes for the right price. While my husband was busy playing the role of the devoted executive in public and the unfaithful partner in private, I was poring over financial reports, memorizing organizational charts, and identifying the weak spots in the company's chain of command. Every detail mattered: who had influence, who was dissatisfied, who might be persuaded. I kept my professional demeanor during every meeting, never letting emotion seep into my voice. The investors saw me as a sharp, ambitious businesswoman, not a wife with revenge on her mind. That was exactly how I wanted it. One by one, the pieces began falling into place. Contracts were drafted, shares were negotiated, and my silent ownership percentage grew steadily. By the time the deal neared completion, I held more power over the company than my husband could have imagined. And through it all, I didn't breathe a word to him. Let him believe his little secret affair was hidden and safe. I wanted the shock to hit him like a tidal wave, the kind that wipes out everything in its path. The final phase was a delicate dance, too fast, and I risked alerting him. Too slow, and I risked losing the momentum I'd built. I scheduled meetings under the guise of consulting work, and spent late nights reviewing legal documents instead of sleeping. My lawyers worked quietly, filing the necessary paperwork through a network of holding companies, so my name wouldn't appear until the deal was sealed. The beauty of the plan was its invisibility. On paper, I was just another investor. When the last signature was inked and the transfer of shares confirmed, I sat alone in my study, staring at the official documents. My heart raced, not from nerves, but from the sheer thrill of knowing that I now controlled the very empire my husband thought was his domain. At that moment, I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, and the narrative of my life. The stage was set, and soon, the curtain would rise on a performance my husband would never forget. The day I revealed myself was ordinary for everyone else, but for my husband, it was the beginning of the end. I waited until the quarterly board meeting, when all the key executives and shareholders would be present. He walked in confidently, unaware that the room's balance of power had shifted. I sat at the head of the table, flipping through the meeting agenda, like I'd been there for years. When his eyes met mine, confusion flickered across his face, followed quickly by disbelief. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice strained but low. I smiled, calm, collected. "I own the majority shares now. This is my company." The room went silent. A few jaws dropped. I could see him processing the words, realizing they weren't a joke. Before he could recover, I continued. "There's one item on today's agenda I think we should address first: staff changes." I turned to the HR director, who was in on my plan. "Effective immediately, husband's name and his executive assistant will be relieved of their duties. Security will escort them out." The color drained from his face, but I didn't give him time to speak. He stood frozen as two security guards approached, the secretary looking equally pale. The board members stayed silent, some clearly stunned, others fighting to hide their smirks. As they were let out, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice, delivered in the most public way possible. And for the first time in months, I felt completely in control of my life. The news traveled through the company like wildfire. By the end of the day, every department knew what had happened in that boardroom. Some people avoided me in the hallways, unsure how to address the new CEO who had just dethroned her own husband. Others came up quietly, offering a firm handshake or a knowing smile. Emails from industry contacts poured in, some congratulating me, others fishing for gossip. I ignored the noise. My focus was on stabilizing the company and proving that this takeover wasn't just personal, it was strategic. I scheduled meetings with department heads, reviewed pending projects, and made it clear that performance and integrity would define this company from now on. Meanwhile, my husband tried to call. First once, then twice, then multiple times a day. I didn't answer. His texts ranged from angry outbursts to desperate pleas. The secretary attempted to reach me too, sending long messages about how she had never meant to hurt me. I deleted them without reading past the first line. Privately, I celebrated. Not with champagne or a party, but with a quiet evening in my own home. Feet up, knowing that I had not only exposed their betrayal, but completely dismantled the power they once held. They had underestimated me, and now they had to live with the consequences. In the weeks that followed, the company began to thrive under new leadership. Without his ego-driven decisions and her constant meddling, productivity soared. Departments that had been plagued by favoritism and drama now operated with clarity and fairness. It was proof that removing toxic people, no matter how high up they are, can change everything. Outside the office, my personal life settled into something peaceful. I no longer woke up wondering where he was or who he was with. The quiet in my home was no longer suffocating, it was comforting. I'd learned that silence can be a sign of stability, not secrecy. Friends asked if I felt guilty for ending his career so abruptly. My answer was always the same. No, I didn't destroy his career. He did. Actions have consequences, and all I did was ensure he faced them. The greatest lesson, though, was about power, both the kind that comes from financial leverage and the kind that comes from knowing your worth. I realized I'd spent years underestimating my own abilities, letting someone else's shadow dim my light. Now, I wasn't just the woman who had been betrayed. I was the woman who rewrote the ending. And I intended to carry that strength into every chapter of my life from here on out. Taking control of the company had started as revenge, but it became something more, a new chapter of independence. I found myself thriving in the role, making decisions that actually benefited the people who worked there, not just the ones at the top. It was satisfying to see the culture shift into something healthier and more transparent. Personally, I embraced the freedom that came with cutting ties to someone who had lied to me so easily. I traveled, reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with, and discovered passions I had put on hold for years. For the first time in a long time, I was living for myself, not for an image of a marriage that had never been real. As for him and her, I never looked back. I didn't check up on their lives, didn't wonder if they landed on their feet. They were simply part of my past, an old story I had finished reading. Because the truth is, the sweetest victory wasn't firing them. It was reclaiming my life, my choices, and my self-respect. And that's a kind of power no one will ever take from me again. If this story moved you, please don't forget to give it a like. And if you love emotional, powerful stories like this one, please make sure to subscribe to the channel.